So we're going to start this morning with our video. We've been playing a video every week, for those of you who haven't been here, of a community member in our 7-week series who tells us what unity means to them. So we're going to see this morning Sonya Holbrook, who's with the kiddos this morning.
Hi, my name is Sonya Holbrook, and I've been coming to Unity for about 5 years. And what Unity means to me is inclusion and a spiritual center where we can grow at our own pace in our spiritual journey. One thing that I've learned here is the importance of taking time every day to meditate and to be one with Spirit. I think one thing that I want people to know is that it is an open community, a welcoming community, and one that families can enjoy spending time throughout their life.
So one of the reasons why we do that is so that you can hear from each other about what our community means to you, instead of me up here every Sunday telling you about what I think the community should mean to you. And as we have been doing for these weeks, we have been exploring The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And so one of the questions I have for you this morning is, are you feeling a bit untethered? Are you feeling like you're getting it? Well, there were a few hours on Thursday night that I thought that my roof of my house might become untethered. But we were blessed indeed by this 10-mile wobble to the east of Hurricane Matthew. And I had a discussion yesterday with some friends, and one of the questions that was posed was, what might we have learned about ourselves during this time as we were preparing for what many of us, and what we were being told, was going to be the most catastrophic hurricane that ever hit Southeast Florida. So one of the things that I learned about myself was that even in the midst of some excitement and some anxiety about preparing for Hurricane Matthew, what I always mostly feel in my life is that I'm divinely protected. That it's just something that's been innate in my life, that I'm physically divinely protected. I have this innate sense, this knowing that I am safe. So even in the midst of the conversations I had with my baby sister, who was up in New Jersey and had gone through Hurricane Sandy, was, why aren't you evacuating? Didn't you hear what they said on television? And that was one phone call. And I said, well, this is what's happening. We're prepared. And, this is where we live. And, we're not coastal. We're not, all the things that I'm sure probably some of you heard as well. And that was the first phone call. And then the second phone call was, are you sure? Are you sure? And yes, I'm sure. And I sent some pictures of what we were doing in the hurricane shutters and all that stuff. And the third phone call was, I'm really mad at you. I'm really mad at you. And so, anybody else feel and get any of those phone calls? So, and in all that, in, being aware that, we did need to prepare, is that I really learned that I feel safe physically. I feel safe physically. What I learned about someone else, which was another one of the questions that we were discussed, was that about my husband, and I knew this to a large extent, but we've never been in this kind of situation before, that he is on it. He has got this sense of taking care of his family. He's got this sense of, this is what we need, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is what we're going to have. And I said, do you really think we need to? Yes, we're going to do this, because this is the way that he can sleep at night. That he has this real sense that it's his job, it's his mission to keep us safe. And so I just kind of knew that about him, but even more so. So I really feel blessed by that. And one of the other things that I relearned, because I've learned this over and over again in my life, and I'm sure that you have too, is through this experience of preparing and moving through Hurricane Matthew, is that there are angels among us. There are angels among us. There are people, and you saw some of them in our moment of appreciation, who will step up and step out to take care of each other. that will put their own needs aside for a while to step out and say, okay, I see this needs to be done. I see this person needs help. I see this person has no power and needs a generator, and I'll just bring them over one and all the gas for it too. There are angels among us. And I've relearned that this time more than ever in my life. And this is positive, practical spirituality, right? When we look around and we see people helping each other, and we see people stepping out, and people that have a clear knowing that what's theirs to do is to be the hands and feet of God in the world. This is practical Christianity, practical spirituality. We talked about that a little bit last week. So I woke up to positive, practical spirituality in the late 1970s. I was in with a group of people, and I became exposed to new thought ideas and philosophy. I discovered Wayne Dyer and Richard Bach and Werner Erhard and Eric Butterworth, who's a Unity minister, and many of the early Unity teachers in our movement. And that was a pivotal time for me in the late 70s. I began to see things in a different way. I began to be a different way. I began to show up in the world a different way. And I never went back to my former self. Oh, sure, I took 3 steps forward sometimes and 1 step back. But I never went back to my former self, the self who thought that the world had somehow wronged me, right? That some things happened in my life that weren't supposed to happen, right? The self who thought the circumstances of my life would forever define me negatively, and that I would forever be in this box of being a victim. And so when I was exposed and when I was impacted by these new thought philosophy and these practical spirituality ideas, my life opened. A door was opened. And I began to be my more expansive self. It launched me on a journey of self-discovery. And I know that, I see a lot of heads nodding out there. No, this is probably the same for you, not the same exact thing that happened. But those of us who do this work, this spiritual work, we all kind of have similar experiences in our lives. So I began to redefine myself in that time of my life. And one of the questions that I asked myself many times, still ask myself, is who am I really? Who am I really? And that's one of the questions that we're exploring in this series. Who are we? Who are you really? If we're not our thoughts, right, as we've been learning, if we're not our beliefs, if we're not the voices in our heads, if we're not our habits, who are we at the depth of our being? So the truth is that we are consciousness. We are the consciousness behind, beneath, around, and through all of that stuff that seems real. We are the consciousness that sits in the center and knows. We are the consciousness that can connect to Source and live our life through that. Amen? Amen. We are spiritual beings embodied in a physical universe. And that, we hear that kind of statement, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Yeah, right? Yeah, it sounds nice, but what does that mean? Yes, it's true. And it doesn't change our lives unless we live like we are. Unless we live like we're spiritual beings, right? We are part of something so much greater than our eyes can see. So much more than we know. Right? We are unlimited. We are unlimited. And this is the promise not only of spiritual teachings, but of this book, The Untethered Soul. Yes? Yes. And we need to live our lives as if that were true. We need to step out in faith and in courage as if that was God's honest truth in our lives. Instead of believing in our false and our limited identity and trying to hold all of that together to our detriment, right? That's what will hold us back. So our consciousness is dynamic. Our consciousness is dynamic. It has the ability to focus and to expand. I talked about feeling like I was a victim when I was in my late teens, feeling like these things that had happened to me, these tragic things, defined me. And it wasn't until that I was able to expand my consciousness and open my eyes and open my heart that I realized that I could live a different life than I had been living before, that I was able to expand my consciousness. The thoughts and limited beliefs that we focus on, they are not solid. They are not reality. They are clouds moving through our inner space. But we try to hold on to them to bring stability in our world. And this clinging becomes the brick and mortar that we build our personality with, right? It becomes who we are. It has the appearance of being solid and being protective, but that becomes the house we live in, like we talked about last week. And it's the mental construct that we hide behind. Michael Singer asks, who have you ever allowed directly into your true inner self without the protection of your mental buffer? And he answers that question by saying no one, not even yourself. But we can overcome that by moving from our head to our heart, by experience that seed of awareness, that self with the capital S that runs behind it all. That's the way to freedom. Through the one who watches, through the one who sits in the center and knows. So we've been working on this, right? We've been working on this even before this series on the Untethered Soul, putting this practice into, putting this philosophy into practice, especially, importantly, in our triggering moments. One of the tools that Singer writes about in the book is the spiritual path of non-resistance. This is a Buddhist philosophy. There's clinging and there's non-resistance. So he says, unhappiness, stress, and disappointment comes from wanting things to be different than what they are. The seat of it is wanting things to be different than what they are. We want to push away things we don't like, right? Anybody have a situation in their life that they're resisting and that they're trying to push away? And the other side of that is trying to force things to happen. Is anybody trying to force anything to happen in your life? Both are forms of resistance. Truth is, though, resistance doesn't change things from happening. If you lose your job and you wallow in unfairness and anger, it isn't going to get you your job back, right? Resistance is born out of a disapproval in life. I don't like what happened, so I'm going to resist it. We don't want to feel the pain. And this is, in the book and also in a Unity teaching, is that what we resist persists. What we resist persists, right? It's like it becomes a magnet when we're focusing on the things that we don't want. It becomes like a magnet for more of that, for more of that. So Singer talks about flowing with the energy of life, not resisting it. So how do we flow with the energy of life? By noticing, simple, by noticing what makes you upset, what makes you sad, what makes you feel worthless or guilty or ashamed, noticing and becoming aware of that. And then relaxing into what Singer calls the seat of self. Our divine essence is what I would call it. We go to the heart, we accept what is happening, and we consciously release the resistance. So the question is, okay, I can do this. I have a story, a physical story. Many of you know I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I had her, I affectionately I was an old mom. I had two other daughters. One is 33 and one is 30, and Sophia is 13. And when I got pregnant for that third time, on purpose, just so you know, she was not an oops baby. She was a blessing baby. And I had started to hear about what being a mom in your 40s, what giving birth in your 40s is like. And I actually left a doctor because every time I went in the first few months of my pregnancy, he would tell me everything that would go wrong. Everything that could go wrong. I said, you know what? No, I have enough of that, so I went to midwives. And so when I went into labor, I went to it was actually it was a hospital, birthing center in a hospital, because Ross was too nervous for me to have the baby at home, which I had done before. So my labor wasn't progressing. So I had my other two girls, totally naturally, no drugs, nothing like that. And so this one, they needed to give me what they give you to speed up labor, right? And so they gave me what they give you to speed up labor. And for those of you who have been in that position, you might know what that's like. It felt to me like I was getting pushed along by a freight train. And I began to lose it. And so what that looked like for me was that I was hyperventilating, and I was panicking. I was probably vocalizing, I don't remember. But I was legitimately losing it. And so the midwife, who was going between two rooms, came in to me, and Glenn, forgive me, but and Diane, I'm going to move down here. She looked at me, and she got in my face, and she said, "Get a hold of yourself." So guess what I did? I got a hold of myself. So, all right, this isn't going well. So I better get a hold of myself. And so what happens in that time when we feel like we're out of control and something says, "Get a grip, woman." And then what happens in that time that I could actually get a grip? What happened there? Right? So in thinking about that, I think about what is it like in my life when I get triggered by if I get angry at somebody, or if I get triggered by something or some whatever. And so what is that space in the middle that lets us go from being out of control to getting a hold of ourselves? That's the holy instant. The holy instant when I realized in that situation, and when we realize when we get triggered that we have the power, that we're not at the mercy of what seems to be going on outside of us, that we're not at the mercy of our emotions or our feelings or even of our pain, right? We're not at the mercy of that, that we, in that holy instant, we have a choice. And all I needed in that moment was for somebody to tell me to do it. And then I realized, okay, I can do this. I can take some deep breaths. And not to say that it got easy, but it got easier. But it got easier, and that's what happens when we put into practice what we know to be true, that we can transcend, that we can rise above what seems to hold us back. I let the energy move through me instead of resisting it, right? And that's what we've been talking about in these weeks. What does it look like to let the energy move through? I'm trying to remember who said this or where this came from. And I heard recently somebody said, "This person has safe passage in my mind." You don't remember either. That this person has safe passage in my, I don't know, I remember who I was with. Oh, it was a video from the class on forgiveness. The board is in a class right now about spiritual maturity. And not that they're not spiritually mature, but we're just kind of like, looking it over. And one of the videos was about forgiveness. And the gentleman in the video said, "This person has safe passage in my heart and safe passage in my mind." And that's what we're called to do in all of these triggering moments, to let them rise up and release and have safe passage and have an openness and expansiveness in our lives. So I have a silly question. How many people want to be happy? How many people don't want to be happy? So hear this. I want to be happy, but I just lost my job and I can't find a new one. How can I be happy? Of course I want to be happy, but my car broke down, I can't afford to fix it. How can I be happy? Of course I want to be happy, but I'm struggling in my relationship and there's a lot of conflict. How can I be happy? And I go on. Of course I want to be happy, but my family member has cancer and I'm really worried about them. How can I be happy? How can I be happy when there's a hurricane coming? How can I be happy? I want to be happy, but oh my gosh, have you watched television? How can I be happy? So anytime we say we want to be happy and there's a but or an if, there's an underlying belief that happiness is beyond our control. And Michael Singer tells us that that's absolutely not true. That no matter what is going on in our lives, happiness, being happy, is in our control. This kind of happiness that we are seeking is not dependent on outward circumstances. So how committed are we to really being happy? How committed are we? Singer says we have a lot of choices, but the ultimate choice is, do you want to be happy no matter what happens? He says unconditional happiness is the highest spiritual technique there is. She says, amen. Amen. So, if we want to be happy, no matter what, we must release qualifying our happiness. That if this happens, I'll be happy. If that doesn't happen, I'll be happy. We just decide to be happy because we don't want to give our happiness away. We don't want to give our happiness away. We don't want our happiness to be conditional upon the behavior of other people. It's bad enough that our happiness is conditional upon our own behavior. To put it outside of ourselves, that is a recipe for trouble, a recipe for unhappiness. He says this. In the end, enjoying life's experience is the only rational thing to do. You're sitting on a planet spinning around in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Go ahead, take a look at reality. You're floating in empty space in a universe that goes on forever. If you have to be here, at least be happy and enjoy the experience. You're going to die anyway. Things are going to happen anyway. Why shouldn't you be happy? You gain nothing by being bothered by life's events. It doesn't change the world, you just suffer. There's always going to be something that can bother you if you let it. This ability to decide to be happy is what the spiritual journey is. Buddhist nun Pema Chodron says two things that helped me in my quest to be happy no matter what, that I'd like to share with you. She says, whatever is happening is the path to enlightenment. And she says, you are the sky. Everything else is just weather. You are the sky. Everything else is just weather. We are these expansive beings as we decide to be. Everything else is just happening. Everything else is just happening. You know who Jill Bolte is? She's a woman who had the stroke, and she was kind of cognizant of what was happening during the stroke, and she wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight. And she says this. She writes that the natural lifespan of an emotion, the average time it takes for it to move through the nervous system and the body, is only a minute and a half. After that, we need thoughts to keep the emotion rolling. You know what that's like, right? Something happens and then we keep telling ourselves the story over and over again about what has happened. So if we wonder why we click into painful emotional states like anxiety, depression, or rage, we need to look no further than our endless inner stream of dialogue, what Michael Singer calls our inner roommate. Because truth is, things that are going to go wrong in our lives quite often. And we have a choice. We can give away our happiness every time something happens. We can continue to tell ourselves the story over and over again, or we can let it go through like the weather. We can be the sky and let it go through like the weather. Because what happens when we're not happy, our heart shuts down. Our heart closes. And so it's simple to say, no matter what happens, I am going to keep my heart open. No matter what happens, I am not going to allow my heart to shutdowns. And the more we keep our heart open, the more available we are to love, to possibility, to spirit, to transformation at depth. And as we lean into that and we let our source come up, our consciousness of the Christ to come up, we notice and we don't block, we are purified and we are happy. So our affirmation this week is I am open, peaceful, and free. Let's affirm that. We're going to affirm it a couple of times. So let's take a deep breath. Together, I am open, peaceful, and free. And so let's take another breath. And as we are affirming this again, let us allow our heart to expand, our very being to expand, remembering that we are the sky as we affirm together. I am open, peaceful, and free. God is bigger than this. Love is bigger than this. We choose peace, we choose love, and we choose happiness. We choose to be open, peaceful, and free. May it be true for each and every one of us.